Our next guest, in an effort to popularize use of enterprise blockchain technology, IBM is open sourcing a large portion of additional code for Hyperledger Fabric, which is intended to allow businesses to create customizable private blockchains. IBM is an early code contributor and continues to be a major maintainer of Hyperledger Fabric. Joining us now is IBM Blockchain General Manager, Kareem Yusuf. Welcome to the show, Kareem.
Hello, thank you.
Good to have you. So perhaps you can start us off with explaining in really simple terms, what is Hyperledger Fabric?
So Hyperledger Fabric is essentially a blockchain platform. It serves as the core infrastructure for building blockchain-based solutions or applications, if you prefer. And it's an open source project, sits with the Linux Foundation, and has many folks kind of engaged in it, trying to drive adoption within the enterprise.
And so what has IBM's role historically been?
So historically, IBM is essentially one of the founding members of the Hyperledger Fabric project, contributing a lot of code that we had developed within research and within the mentioned. What we announced this week was additional contributions to really help with the management of a blockchain. So think about that in terms of creating nodes, managing networks, and making it just very easy to do.
So, Kareem, welcome. I have a question. You know, we have this Colonial Pipeline situation that happened a couple of weeks ago, and JBS and hospitals, a whole bunch of industries and businesses are being attacked. So how exactly is what you're doing going to, would that fix it? And why that would be a solution versus just better coding, better security on a single database?
Well, look, I think towards the issue that you are describing there, that first and foremost is a statement of security and security access and controls. And obviously, as IBM, we do a lot of work around that realm. When I think about blockchain in the enterprise, I actually think about the automation and transformation of key business processes. Take, for example, invoice reconciliation, or a digital health pass, or provenance and transparency of key commodities, seafood out of Norway as an example. That's what we begin to fixate on. And what blockchain allows you to do in processes that involve many participants, as you well know, is get this kind of secure basis for exchanging and sharing key data in an immutable way, right? Which supports the process that you're focused on. So if you've got a blockchain underpinning invoice reconciliation, then you are able to, everybody knows the source of that data, you're reducing disputes, you're automating processes, and you take out, quite frankly, a lot of expense from a process.
Mm-hmm. Kareem, you know, in 2015, Blythe Masters, who was a banker, she invented the credit default swap, famously said, blockchain, not Bitcoin. It held so much promise. There were projections that 10% of US GDP would be on the blockchain by 2027. Hundreds of pilot projects were launched, and almost all of them failed. So that blockchain, not Bitcoin philosophy kind of died. So is open sourcing this code a last-ditch effort to revive that enterprise of blockchain promise?
So I don't really see it in that way. I think what I could tell you I see happening in the enterprise is an ongoing focus on digital transformation. And blockchain is a key ingredient in supporting that. Particularly if you look in the realms of supply chain, as an example, there's a lot going on in terms of those key processes. So when I think about what we've done with the open source community, it is to ensure that there's a vibrant, active community around Hyperledger Fabric and that we're supporting adoption. For me, this is now a statement of scale and adoption. And when you want to scale and adopt in terms of supporting key use cases, you make it easier for people to do, you provide support for them to leverage it, and then you focus on the actual use cases you're trying to address. That's where the value starts.
So IBM is using enterprise blockchain to track COVID-19 vaccinations in New York City. What other use cases are we seeing? You know, people used to talk about supply chain management, real estate ledgers, whole industries, but, you know, it hasn't really gotten to that point. But what are we seeing so far?
I would say we're seeing definitely a lot of activity around what I would call track and trace and provenance, particularly in terms of food. We have been working very actively with a lot of customers on something we call IBM Food Trust. And that's where we fixate on being able to track and trace different commodities, from source to store. I'm seeing a lot of advances in that regards, moving into other commodities, textiles, cosmetics, right? Because also consumers want to understand the provenance of what they're buying. And this, I think, is laying the foundation for what will come next as people begin to really fixate on sustainability and begin to leverage these very networks to successfully track what is going on in terms of carbon accounting, the carbon emissions associated and stuff like that. So I really think that, once again, as I said, this is about the transformation of core business processes. I think we're beginning to see these begin to accelerate and gain traction as people think about real work, not projects, but real, what you might consider mundane, but real core processes. As I said, invoice reconciliation. Maybe not something we talk about a lot, but a lot of money in that, or expensive.